The Lantern in Widow's Hollow, an original Halloween short story. There's a road in northern Vermont that most GPS systems won't even register. Locals know it as Widow's Hollow, a winding trail of gravel and roots that carves its way through a forgotten forest, shadowed by twisted trees and swallowed by fog 9 months of the year. For generations, it's been said that if you walk far enough down that path on Halloween night, you'll see a single lantern glowing between the trees. And if you follow it, well, no one's quite sure what happens. But the ones who have tried were never quite the same. Some say it's the spirit of Eliza Moore, a woman who lived alone in a cabin deep in the woods nearly 150 years ago. They called her Widow Moore, after her husband disappeared during the winter of 1873. Folks whispered that she'd gone mad with grief. Others whispered darker things, that she was a witch, that she'd made a pact with something old and terrible, that she lit the lantern to lure wanderers in, hoping to trade souls with the forest spirits for her husband's return. But that's just a story, right? Last Halloween, a grad student named Harper decided to find out for herself. She was writing her thesis on New England folklore and thought Widow's Hollow would make for a dramatic chapter. She packed a flashlight, an old Polaroid camera, and a journal, and set off just before midnight. She told her friends it was probably just an old wives' tale. But deep down, she wanted to believe it was real. The air turned colder the deeper she walked. At some point, even her flashlight began to flicker, as though the darkness around her wasn't just the absence of light, but something heavier, something watching. And then she saw it. A lantern, hanging from a branch at the edge of the path. Its flame didn't flicker in the wind. It didn't move at all. It just glowed. Soft, amber, almost warm. Harper stepped off the path. She told herself it was just an old oil lamp. Maybe someone was playing a prank. But with every step, the trees seemed to lean closer. The light pulled her in, deeper, deeper into the woods. Then everything stopped. The lantern vanished. So did the path. The forest was silent, not peaceful, but hollow, like something had exhaled all the life from the trees. Harper turned in circles, trying to retrace her steps, but nothing looked familiar. Her flashlight died completely, and the batteries in her camera had drained. She reached for her phone. No service, no power. That's when she heard it. A low, creaking sound, like a rocking chair moving slowly on old wood. And then, a woman's voice. "You came for him, didn't you?" Harper froze. "He never came back, but maybe you will." A figure stepped into view, thin, cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a veil of long gray hair. She held the lantern in one hand, and in the other, a wedding band, dulled with age and rusted with something far darker than time. Harper was found the next morning by a pair of hunters, unconscious near the edge of the hollow. Her journal was gone. Her camera cracked. Her phone wiped clean. She never spoke about what she saw. Not really. But she moved away from Vermont, changed her major, avoided wooded areas for the rest of her life. The only clue she left behind was scribbled on the last page of a notebook she left behind. She's still waiting. The lantern is real, and if you see it, don't follow. The Music Box, an original Halloween short story. Everyone has that one antique shop in town. The kind with crooked shelves, dusty windows, and a faint smell of cedar and mothballs that lingers long after you leave. For Jenna, that shop was Finch's Antiques. tucked into the corner of Main Street. She loved browsing its cluttered aisles, old books, porcelain dolls, brass candlesticks. Most of it was harmless junk. But one October afternoon, she noticed something that stopped her in her tracks. It was a small wooden music box, mahogany, carved with roses along the sides. Its paint was chipped, the metal winding key slightly bent. But when she lifted the lid, the mechanism inside was gleaming, almost new. A tiny porcelain ballerina stood in the center, her arms frozen mid-spin. Jenna wound the key. The first notes of a lullaby drifted out, soft, tinny, but strangely beautiful. The ballerina turned once, twice, and then the song ended abruptly, as though someone had cut the melody in half. The shop owner, Mr. Finch, shuffled over. "That one's been here a long time," he muttered. "Not for sale, really." Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Everything's for sale, isn't it?" He hesitated. "Some things shouldn't be." But Jenna was persistent. After a little convincing, Mr. Finch finally sold it to her for $10, wrapped it in old newspaper, and warned her, almost under his breath, "Don't wind it after midnight." At first it was just a pretty decoration on her bookshelf. Sometimes, when friends came over, she'd wind the key to show off the ballerina's slow, elegant twirl. Everyone agreed the song felt a little off, like it was missing something. But the real strangeness started a week later. Jenna was working late one night, her apartment silent except for the hum of her desk lamp. Around 1 a.m., she heard faint music coming from the living room, that same lullaby. She froze. She hadn't wound the box. She walked into the living room, and sure enough, the ballerina was turning slowly, the music spilling out into the dark. She closed the lid. The song stopped. But when she turned to go back to her desk, she swore she heard humming. Soft, from the corner of the room. Over the next few nights, it kept happening. The music box would play on its own, always after midnight. Sometimes the ballerina turned, sometimes she didn't, and the humming grew louder. One evening, Jenna recorded the sound on her phone just to prove she wasn't imagining it. When she played it back, her stomach sank. Underneath the melody, there was a voice, a woman's voice, faint but clear. "Keep dancing. Keep dancing. Don't stop." The final straw came on Halloween night. Jenna had fallen asleep on the couch, candy wrappers scattered across the coffee table. At exactly midnight, she woke to the sound of the music box again. Only this time, it wasn't on the shelf. It was on the floor. The ballerina spun violently, faster than she should have been able to, the lullaby shrieking through the tiny speaker like a warped record. And behind it, the humming wasn't humming anymore. It was singing. A full verse of words Jenna had never heard before. Her hands shook as she grabbed the box, slammed the lid shut, and stuffed it into the bottom drawer of her dresser. She never wound it again. But sometimes, late at night, she swears she hears faint music drifting from the bedroom. And every so often, when she walks past Finch's Antiques, she notices an empty spot on the shelf. The music box, waiting. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. An urban legend revisited. If you live in almost any small town, You've probably heard some version of this story. A lonely stretch of road, a driver late at night, a figure at the edge of the highway, thumb raised, or just standing there, waiting. Sometimes it's a young woman, sometimes a child, sometimes an old man with a limp. But the ending is almost always the same. They disappear before the journey is over. In my town, the legend begins on Route 49, a winding two-lane road that cuts through miles of cornfields and empty barns. People call it Dead Man's Curve because of the sharp bend near mile marker 13. The story goes back to the 1950s, when a girl named Evelyn supposedly died there in a car accident on prom night. Her date lost control of their Chevy, and the car skidded off the road. He survived, she didn't. Ever since then, drivers have claimed to see her, standing by the bend, dressed in a pale gown, her hair damp as if from rain. One October evening, a man named Carl was driving home after visiting his brother. It was just past midnight, and fog hugged the road like a blanket. He slowed near Dead Man's Curve, gripping the wheel tighter. That's when he saw her. A girl standing by the guardrail. White dress, long hair, barefoot. At first he thought she was injured. Maybe her car had broken down. He pulled over, rolled down the window, and asked if she needed a ride. She nodded, silently. When she climbed into the back seat, Carl noticed how cold the air felt. Colder than outside. He tried making small talk, asking if she was from town. She just whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I need to go home." She gave him an address a few miles down the road. Carl drove carefully through the fog, checking the mirror every few seconds. The girl sat perfectly still, staring out the window. When they reached the house, a small farmhouse with a front porch light glowing dimly, Carl pulled into the driveway. He turned around to tell her they'd arrived. The back seat was empty. His heart pounded. He swore she'd been there just seconds earlier. He even felt the seatbelt still swinging, like someone had just climbed out. Shaking, he walked up to the farmhouse and knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered, Carl stammered, describing the girl he had picked up, how she vanished, how she asked to be brought here. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She said softly, "That was my daughter, Evelyn. She died on this road over 60 years ago." To this day, locals say that if you drive Route 49 near midnight in October, you might see her waiting. Some say she's looking for her way home. Others think she's trying to warn drivers before they reach the curve. But everyone agrees on one thing. If you stop to pick her up, don't look away until you reach her house. Because if you do, she just might not let you go. The Last Bus, an original Halloween short story. It was nearly midnight when Claire realized she'd missed her train. She cursed under her breath, clutching her bag tighter. The streets of the small town were nearly empty, the shops shuttered, and the only light came from the flickering street lamps that buzzed against the fog. The station attendant pointed her toward the last bus of the night, Route 6, running straight through the old district before heading toward the highway. "You'll want to catch it," he said flatly. "There won't be another until morning." Claire jogged to the stop, her shoes slapping against the pavement. Sure enough, a faded yellow bus sat idling at the curb. Its headlights glowed weakly, and the painted numbers on the side had long since peeled away. The driver didn't speak when she climbed aboard, just nodded once and closed the doors with a heavy thunk. Only 2 other passengers sat inside. An older man in a tattered suit staring straight ahead, and a woman clutching a bouquet of dead flowers, her head tilted down so her face was hidden. Claire slid into a seat near the middle, trying not to breathe too loudly. The bus groaned forward. The ride was quiet, too quiet. No chatter, no music, just the rumble of the engine and the faint squeal of the brakes as the bus wound through narrow streets. But every so often Claire noticed something strange. They weren't stopping. She passed familiar intersections, old storefronts, and even a corner cafe she remembered from her college years. All of them had bus stops, but the driver didn't slow down. He just kept driving. The older man never moved. The woman never lifted her head. And then, out of the fog, Claire saw a figure at the side of the road. A young man waving desperately, his arm stretched out as if begging the bus to stop. Claire opened her mouth to shout, but the bus didn't slow. The figure's face vanished into the mist as they sped by. She turned to the driver. "You didn't stop. Someone was waiting." The driver didn't answer. His eyes never left the road. Minutes passed. The streets grew emptier, the buildings older, abandoned. Windows boarded up, street lamps burned out. Claire pressed her forehead to the glass and whispered, "Where are we?" That's when she noticed something else. The man in the suit was gone. His seat was empty. She hadn't seen him move, hadn't heard him leave. The woman with the flowers shifted slowly, lifting her head just enough for Claire to catch a glimpse. Her skin was pale, her eyes hollow, and when she breathed it sounded like a sigh of wind through a grave. The bouquet in her hands wasn't flowers at all. It was stems, dry, dead. Claire's heart pounded. She stumbled down the aisle toward the driver. "I want to get off! Stop the bus!" Finally, the driver spoke. His voice was low, almost tired. "This bus only stops for the dead." The world outside blurred into nothing but fog. The air in the bus grew cold, every breath visible. Claire gripped the rail, her knuckles white. "Then why am I here?" she whispered. The driver's eyes flicked to hers in the mirror, just once. And then she remembered. The screech of tires earlier that evening, the horn, the blinding light as she crossed the street, rushing toward the station. She had never made it to the platform. The bus shuddered, slowing as a row of faint lights appeared in the distance, not street lamps, lanterns, dozens of them, glowing softly along a long, shadowed road. The woman with the bouquet stood, moving toward the door. The driver looked at Claire. "End of the line." The Mirror in Room 6. An original Halloween short story. The old roadside motel wasn't Maya's first choice, but with the storm flooding the highway and no other vacancies in town, she didn't have much of a choice. The place smelled faintly of mildew, and the neon sign outside buzzed like a dying wasp. The woman at the front desk gave her a room key, room 6, and warned her almost apologetically, "The mirror's a little strange. Don't mind it." Maya thought nothing of it. Old furniture, creaky floors, weird mirrors. Motels were always like that. But when she unlocked room 6 and set her bag down, she understood what the woman meant. The mirror wasn't just large. It covered the entire wall opposite the bed, framed in tarnished silver. When she stood in front of it, she swore her reflection lagged by half a second, like the glass wasn't quite in sync. That night, the storm raged outside, rain pelting the windows, thunder rolling across the fields. Maya curled up in bed with a book. Every so often, she caught herself glancing at the mirror, and once she froze. Her reflection wasn't holding a book. It was just staring at her. Maya laughed nervously, rubbing her eyes. Just her imagination, a trick of the stormlight. She forced herself to look away, but minutes later she glanced again. Her reflection's mouth was moving, silent, words she couldn't hear. Maya sat up, heart racing. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, walking toward the mirror. Her reflection mimicked her steps, her posture. Everything seemed normal, until she turned to grab her phone off the nightstand. Her reflection didn't turn. It just kept staring at her. She dropped the phone. The reflection's smile widened, sharp, unnatural. The lights flickered. The storm outside seemed to fall silent, like the whole world was holding its breath. And then, faintly, she heard it, a knock, from inside the glass. Maya stumbled back, her legs hitting the bed. She grabbed her bag and bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock. When she finally yanked it open, the hallway was empty, eerily quiet. But before she stepped out, she looked back one last time. Her reflection wasn't standing where she had been. It was standing right by the door, and it raised a hand, slowly, as if reaching for her shoulder. The next morning, the motel room was empty. Maya's car was still in the lot, her bags still on the bed. The woman at the front desk sighed when the housekeeper told her. "Room 6 again," she muttered, shaking her head. And when she went inside to close the curtains, she noticed the mirror. Maya was still in it,